Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. The end of Maulana Fazl Rahman's protest, finally the former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's return to London for treatment. Will the political temperature in the country decrease? Of course, the Prime Minister today laid to rest speculation surrounding the extension of the army chief. He also in fact made the announcement on the appointment of the Joint Chief of Staff's Committee. Considering all of these, of course, another issue looming ahead is the foreign funding case of the PTI. Will all of these factors increase the political temperatures, or will they come down in the next in the coming days? We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about the hearing itself. Of course, it will be heard. The case itself will be heard day to day. What can be expected from this case? What kind of difficulties can PTI face as far as their government is concerned? Let's talk about all of that today. I have with me Barrister Danish Iftikhar, who's a legal expert. Thank you for joining us today. Dr. Niaz Murtaza, who's a political analyst. Thank you for being with us today. Barrister Sahab, in your legal opinion, how do you see the upcoming weeks, let's say, as far as the political temperatures are concerned, the situation is concerned? Of course, we have finally, like I said, seen the whole debate surrounding the former Prime Minister's the fact that he was sick. Unfortunately, there was a lot of speculation surrounding his return. There was, of course, ultimately the involvement of the Supreme Court also. How do you see all of these developments?
Well, firstly, I think that the political temperature, in my opinion, is not going to go down from here. The reason primarily being what you pointed out in your intro, the PTI foreign funding case.
Right.
I think that people might say, and as you also said, that Maulana's Dharna is over. But I don't think the danger that the threat looming over the government, is over. We can't say that for sure, and that is because of this reason: the day-to-day hearing, which has been ordered by Election Commission of Pakistan, and it was done on the application filed by the Rehbar Committee, which was the same Rehbar Committee which was negotiating with the government during the Dharna and all that. So now the government has gone into another legal, debate, and a writ petition has been filed in the High Court once more, and thereby, they are seeking the scrutinization of their accounts. They're seeking a stay over that.
Right.
So, in my opinion, if there is nothing to hide, which has primarily been, the openness of the government, the transparency of the government and elected officials, which has been the hallmark of speeches of Prime Minister Imran Khan. If that is the case, then I don't find any reason why you want to. I know it's their right; they have the legal right to consult the appropriate forum for the remedy. But then again, I mean, wasn't this the whole premise that we found, during the Dharna of 2014? That why is the government hiding behind the legal? Why are they seeking stay, and why are they not opening those 4 constituencies?
If there's nothing to hide, then
why
open
go?
the
Yes,
accounts.
and they're not saying something which is out of the box. What they're saying is they want to scrutinize the accounts and of PTI. And now, interestingly, just today, Prime Minister Imran Khan said that there is nothing to hide, and nothing for the PTI to fear in this particular case.
Right.
Because they have submitted audited accounts and at various forums. But I think that is missing the point. The point is not whether they submitted audited accounts or not.
Right.
The point raised by Akbar Babar in 2014, when he first came to the Election Commission, was that certain accounts were hidden when these accounts were audited, and these accounts have not been disclosed. So that is the crux, that is the real issue. And that is something I'm perplexed, and I'm not sure why the government does not want to conduct an open debate and open up its accounts for such kind of because if there is nothing to hide,
then why not do that?
Then why not do that?
Let's go to Niaz Sabji. Dr. Sab, what do you think? Do you agree with Danish?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of things that Mr. Danish has mentioned. The fact that the case has been going on for 5 years, that tells you something about it. Like the PTI government has only been in power for 1 year, and then there were the 4 years before that. So why was now you can say there might be a bit of, influence from the government, overt or covert.
Right.
But then the question is, why was the case not being, going at an even pace even before that for 4 years? And now, there is
Why is
this.
it being heard day to day now?
And now suddenly, you go into,
The
fourth
speed of
gear,
it, right.
and, then you start talking about, day-to-day hearing, which may again be, unfair if, there isn't enough chance for the defense. So I don't think the Election Commission of Pakistan has handled this case very well. But then, I think it should be heard at an even pace now without long delays and without an overrush as well. And the PTI should be forthcoming instead of dragging its feet if it wants to be taken seriously on its promise about accountability, its call.
But it
Then
does.
certainly.
But do you think it opens? Of course, in a sense, it does open up the political party to a lot of a lot of speculation, if nothing else, and of
Yeah,
course
I
a
mean,
lot of every scrutinization. There's no denying that, and they have to be ready for that level of scrutinization.
Every party should be open to that.
Right.
And from what I hear, if if they are found guilty, I don't know if they will or not. I'm not a lawyer. I haven't looked at the evidence directly, so I don't want to speculate. But the maximum punishment could be that the party is delisted and all its legislators from the
Right.
federal government to the provincial to the local
The
level.
stakes, yes.
That's the maximum.
I will go to Sab again for
For those
for the
kind of
ramifications,
questions.
whatever
So
happens.
again, I would say greater accountability and finishing this case as quickly
And
as
of course, the
possible
government
without
has been
rushing
saying,
it.
and we've also, Javed Jadoon Sab, who's a senior analyst. Javed Sab, thank you for joining us. In your opinion, Javed Sab, do you think that this kind of scrutiny, it's certainly not new if we look at the past. In a sense, do you think that it's history repeating itself?
Thank you very much, Maruk. I think holistically speaking, in any democratic country or any democratic society, the processes like the accountabilities
Right.
and what we are talking about, the foreign funding issue for a particular political party, so on and so forth, should be a process not to be seen as a political one,
Right.
but done by the institutions themselves as per rules and regulations, as per the law of the land. But in Pakistan, we have seen that, like it was mentioned, that the process of foreign funding's investigation was pending for the last 5 years.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, this reinvented vigor and reinvented enthusiasm on part of Election Commission of Pakistan definitely gives rise to certain questions why at this particular point in time or this particular juncture in our history, when so many conspiracy theories are being spread by different quarters in Pakistan. I think it is very strange that an institution which is headed by a retired judge of the Supreme Court of Pakistan,
Right.
a respected person, and the institution itself is a respected institution, sat on this particular case for the last 5 years, and then you wake up one fine morning and you say that we would like to finish it within a month before the judge retires next month. I think it makes the mockery of the whole political process in Pakistan. I think we need to grow up now. We are a country of about 200 million people, very resilient, resourceful, talented people.
Right.
We have got functioning parliament, and we have got the institutions which have been strengthened in the passage of time. But then all of a sudden we see certain steps taken by certain institutions which put a question mark on our ability to move on with democratic
So
project.
Rajab, that's true, but of course, the due process of law should be followed. I mean, that is very, very, very important for justice. But at the same time, if they don't have, if there's nothing to be hidden, then why not just, I mean, then they should be able to give the kind of evidence that's required. That's the other side of.
I agree with you, Maruk. But if we start talking about the sources of the foreign funding, then it should not be confined to a single political party. There are question marks on other political parties as well. We know that the questions of foreign funds have been raised about the two main opposition political parties, and even for that matter, the religio-political parties as well. Then why not start an exercise which is across the board, which is transparent, which is seen to be an independent approach, not targeting any political group, party, or individual. I think this is how we can move forward on a path of democratic strengthening of the institutions in Pakistan. But I think this, in my personal opinion, it raises serious questions when the representatives of certain political parties go and they pressurize the head of the Election Commission of Pakistan, and that gentleman accepts the demands now all of a sudden, and he says that he's going to hear the case on day-to-day basis. I think government of the day, like it was pointed out, is in power for the last 13, 14 months. But this case was pending even during the last regime's tenure. Why it wasn't taken up? Now it is being taken up. Well, there's nothing wrong in that. I totally agree with you. And the ruling Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf should cooperate with Election Commission of Pakistan. But having said that, the questions need to be answered as well.
Right. Let me go to, let us see if we can get some questions answered, legal questions. Ji, Barrister Sahab, what about the pace of the case? Do you think it's a little unnatural the way that it's being heard like on a day-to-day basis now? And why this sudden pickup of pace like we're talking about? Is it something that, you know, if it was going to work at that kind of speed, it should have happened from earlier on? Do you think that it seems to indicate some kind of pressure? Or is it due process which should have been, you know, perhaps followed earlier on also? Why was it lying so dormant for so long? What's your opinion on this?
Well, I think that if you have to judge a particular case or comment on that, first you have to go by what is the order sheet and what is the, you know, the pace of the proceedings all along. And if we study that from 2014 onwards, when the petition was first filed, we've been seeing delaying tactics on the part of PTI, either on one pretext or the other. And then, you know, there was the recent case when the lawyer that they engaged, they said that they had appointed him as an official, in an official capacity. So that's why they needed a change of attorney. So, I mean, these kind of tactics, I mean, and this is just one instance I'm talking about. You know, there are applications that were filed, you know, they were just, you know, the main purpose of that was to gain time. And, you know, if you read the file, you will understand this, that, you know, this is not something which has come up all of a sudden. You know, 2014 and now we have got a 5-year gap, you know, 5-year gap, and now you've got a party which is a ruling party. You know, and when we talk about PMLN and People's Party, why their cases are not being handled, why are they not being studied? The question is, the problem in Pakistan is, whenever someone raises an allegation or puts someone in, you know, behind the witness stand, that person, you know, points to the other person, that, you know, go and look up what they have done. They, instead of, you know, giving answers and instead of giving explanation from themselves, and this happened even in Panama case, you know. I'm not talking about a particular political party or a group. Even in the Panama case, you know, when this case came up, the Prime Minister, you know, he requested that the commission be formed, and then he said about all those people, you know, who had done so much bad, and, you know, how this position of Pakistan has come into since 1947. So, you know, even in that instance also, he said that, look, you're pointing a finger at me, look at other people. But then what happened? The court did not say that, okay, we're going to look into those cases as well. The court looked at what the case before it was.
And that's what is likely to happen.
That was what, yes, exactly. And now the question is, yes, exactly. And now the question is not, the Election Commission does not have to consider in the petition before it whether there are cases against the other parties and, you know, what should be done about those cases.
Of course,
the Election Commission has to decide on this case because it is before it. And, you know, I was talking about the case file and the case history.
But what about the pace of it? I mean, of course, you're saying that since 2014 it has been filed, but why to pick up this kind of pace suddenly?
The case was there for the last 5 years. It is not being presented
that's what
a couple of weeks ago.
But you're saying that but he's saying that there have been delaying tactics from the political party itself.
Yes, I mean, you know, even now they've gone to the High Court again, once again, you know, and they're saying that scrutiny of their accounts, you know, should be avoided, and there is no. Before also they took the stance that there is no jurisdiction.
I asked the same question to Javed Sahab, and I'm going to ask you, legally speaking, do you think that there is a pattern here? Do you think that as a student of law that perhaps, you know, history is repeating itself? Of course, politically, PTI is saying that they have nothing to hide. They're willing to, you know, expose themselves completely, and that, you know, their accounts have been, like Niaz Sahab also mentioned, they've filed them before, they've been, you know, had assessed also independently, but they're still going to the High Court to prevent that kind of scrutiny. So there is a precedent for this, isn't that true?
Yes, it is true, and you know, the question is that when the problem in Pakistan is basically, you know, the reason why this problem is before us is that whenever a party comes into power
Right.
and the prime minister is elected, they don't disassociate themselves from the political party. They don't let the political party be a separate entity. So then questions will arise, that if a party is a ruling party and it is heading the government and also heading the political party, so there should not be a conflict of interest. There should not be such kind of allegations, if they are raised. Imran Khan, as Prime Minister, should not have to defend them.
Right.
It should be the party defending it. But
Right.
unfortunately, in Pakistan,
That
what
doesn't
we see is that the Prime Minister, he also holds the political portfolio of the head of the political
true,
party.
yes.
So I think that unless this is addressed, and this is what I think that one thing that PTI did not do, which it promised to do, which might have prevented this kind of a situation from arising, was to hold party elections way before
Right.
they were actually held. And because if that was done in time, and if that was held within time, and then those kind of allegations which surfaced later on that there was some kind of a group, Jahangir Tareen group, who was influencing them, then if that hadn't happened, there would have been more transparency, and then the Prime Minister would not have to defend the political party and
But at this
explanations.
stage, I mean, hypothetically speaking, and this can relate to any other political party also. In this kind of a scenario, if the Prime Minister disassociates himself now, and if at this point the ramifications or the effects of a decision against, or finding in negative as far as this case is concerned, will still have a lot of effects for the PTI and the government itself. Isn't that true?
Well, if he does that, it will be a big step for him. But if he does that, it will, remove a big onus from his shoulders. And, then he will also be able to say that, look, this party was under scrutiny, and look, there was a conflict of interest, which he has been asserting all over, in the past cases,
Right.
whenever we have seen that. But it will be a difficult decision. It will not be a very easy
And
decision.
it might not necessarily, Niasab, do you think it might not necessarily at this point, of course we don't know if he's ever going to do that. I mean, this is all a hypothetical discussion, but if that does happen, of course it might not send the right kind of signal also. That also is a fact, isn't that true?
Well, even if he tries to be, neutral about it, transparent about it, he can still
passive.
salvage his, prestige and, remove, the conflicts and the contradictions that seem to, run so strongly. So, for example, the speech that he made over the weekend, his main gripe was that there are different rules for, the powerful people and for the weak people. And he was, of course, talking about, the Nawaz Sharif verdict from the Lahore High Court. But then
Right.
isn't that much more true about, this very case, this foreign funding case that it has been dragging for, 5 years? And if you compare that, yes, there were some delays in the Panama cases as well. But then I also remember that towards the end, the ex-Chief Justice was, shouting at the lawyers to, even hold hearings on the weekend and finish it.
right.
And then, the judgment was announced 3 weeks before
It was
the
expected,
elections,
yeah.
and then that very verdict was kind of not overturned, but at least suspended, 3 or 4 months later. So can we imagine what kind of impact it would have had on elections that, you had the ex-prime minister convicted just 3 weeks ago, and what was the purpose behind, fast-tracking those cases? So clearly, there might be a slight relief that might have been given to Nawaz Sharif now, but, if you compare it with, with the rough way that he has been handled, in all these cases, from the initial disqualification to this last verdict, I think, the scales are still very much tilted against him and in favor of PTI. And, the foreign funding case is not the only one. There are other cases as well, the helicopter use case, the terrorism case. I think Imran Khan is the sitting prime minister who has the most cases against him in Pakistan's history, and none of them seem to be moving.
But
So
right,
clearly-
exactly. So, and they're not being heard day to day. That was what I was going to say. Exactly what
Yeah.
you've said. Ji, Javed, sir, what's your opinion?
Maruk, I have a little different view about the whole situation, what we are talking about. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, we start taking things in isolation. When we start talking about the former prime minister, then we look at the prism in a different way. And then this issue disappears, another comes up, like the foreign funding issue.
Right.
If I quote a couple of examples, even in any advanced country like the USA, the fund collection is a legal issue, not a problem with that, unless the sources of funding are hidden, whether these sources are foreign or domestic.
Right.
Here we are talking about the issue of the foreign funding. Can't we talk about the issue of domestic funding? Are the political parties not receiving funds from within the country and from dubious sources? Are those sources of funding being disclosed by major political parties? The answer is no, absolutely not. Are the other political parties not receiving funding from foreign sources? Of course they are. So we need to have a very uniform kind of law. I think witch hunting, any action on part of any institution must not be seen to be aimed at witch hunting, whether it was against the former Prime Minister or it is against the sitting Prime Minister. It is very unique case in Pakistan. We start justifying it, but in any civilized, any democratic society, it is unthinkable that any individual convicted would be allowed to leave the country, and then with only very superficial kind of a guarantee that he would return to Pakistan and face the remaining prison term. I mean, there should be a debate in Pakistan now. Enough is enough, Maruf, because every day I think Pakistan faces a brand new issue, which is out of box issue, and we don't even discuss about the kind of impact it has on the society. In Pakistan's demographic composition, if you look at that, more than 60% population is a young population. What lessons they are learning from Pakistan's democratic project? What kind of a path they are going to choose for themselves if they start thinking about involving themselves in the politics of Pakistan? I think even in this particular issue, I don't see a transparency on part of ECP.
But don't you think this is a step towards that kind of transparency? I mean, of course, they have to go by what the law is at this
But
time.
only if it is aimed at the objective you're talking about. But if it is aimed at some other direction, and if they are trying to squeeze the ruling party, or they are trying to push the Prime Minister against the wall on one pretext or the other, I think then we are going to create a banana republic of Pakistan, and nobody would be respecting the law of the land. I totally agree with the views expressed here that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, the ruling party, should have cooperated with the Election Commission of Pakistan. But I think in the same way, and I can say that the former Prime Minister's issue is also a very contradictory issue.
But don't you think,
I think even
Javed
Prime
Sahib-
Minister himself, I think
Right.
he should be blamed for that. Because when you talk about the rule of law, then you're no one to allow
Exactly.
any convicted person to come out of the jail and then allow the persons to go out. Now the questions are being
But we've
raised.
seen how
whether
the Supreme Court reacted to the comments by the Prime Minister also. I mean, they've clearly taken them head on. They've answered, they've said that, look, this is a Supreme Court that's made tough decisions.
Maruf, in my opinion, the Prime Minister shouldn't have made those observations against the judiciary. And then the judiciary shouldn't have responded the way it responded, because you make each other controversial in the eyes of the people of Pakistan, and the respect of the institutions diminishes with every passing day, week and month, and the kind of arguments are being staged in Pakistan at the main arena of the electronic television channels and print media, and the debate going on among the people themselves, the intelligentsia, the intellectuals, the media persons, and the members of the civil society. What kind of a picture we are portraying of a Pakistan where there is no
but
rule of law?
unfortunately, the institutions have now been dragged into this kind of a war. I mean, into that war of politics at this time. They've been made controversial now. Isn't that true?
But in many instances, Maruf, I can again quote many instances, even in India, when there was a lot of criticism of the verdict passed by the Supreme Court of India in the Ayodhya case. And on the social media, on the regular electronic television channels, and the discourse being carried out in the civil society, the intelligentsia, etc. But they never responded to any kind of a criticism being directed at the judiciary. I think, in my personal opinion, this is my personal opinion, that judiciary must avoid involving itself in mudslinging match or any kind of arguments with the government or any other individual. Because
fair enough, but
while by responding, you bring yourself at the same level. And
but Javed Sahib, to be fair, I'm going to go to Danish with this also, but to be fair, as far as the former Prime Minister is concerned, that issue was brought before the Supreme Court. So, as far as dragging, as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, they were dragged into it, so to speak. There's no denying that. And once that happens, they have to adjudicate one way or the other.
I totally agree with you, Maruf. This is what I said. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, he should be very careful in selecting his words, his statements. Very much calibrated words should be uttered by the Prime Minister of Pakistan. And because he's the Prime Minister of the country, not the Prime Minister of any particular political party or grouping. That statement was in bad taste. And then again, the CJ responding to it. Basically, the problem is you're trying to create a kind of a spectacle in Pakistan, which is not projecting the image we would like to project of Pakistan, a democratic and politically mature nation state in the Committee of Nations.
Right. Danish, what do you think? As a lawyer, I mean, do you think that the Supreme Court perhaps, this answering back of whatever comments had been made, it does, open up, so to speak, this to and fro exchange. It does, I mean, in a sense, I agree with Javed Saab that it creates a spectacle on TV screens across the country for everyone to watch. What kind of an image is it giving out, in your opinion?
There's an old proverb which says that, judges speak their minds through their judgments. And that is how it should happen, in a very conducive, conducive environment and in a perfect environment. But, if the judiciary is, there are serious allegations, raised against the judiciary. And not a particular high court or a lower court, the judiciary as an institution is attacked, in this manner. Then what do you suggest? How should the ordinary person's belief in the judicial system be addressed? That question mark, it has to be addressed in a certain manner.
Again, by decisions then?
Yes, it has to be in
Again
a decisions. Yes, theoretically speaking, yes. But we must also consider this Chief Justice of Pakistan, ever since he has ascended as the Chief Justice of Pakistan, he's taken oath. He has gone a long way, from the active judicial activism which was shown by the previous Chief Justice, Saqib Nisar. And he has managed to
and the kind of dignity that he's shown, of dignity of office of the Chief Justice of Pakistan. I mean, things have changed. If not, I mean, that's what I would say. Before from Saqib Nisar's time. That is true.
I mean, there were quite a few controversial issues which the previous Chief Justice, he raised and he decided and he took suo motu notices of. And, he came a long distance, even before he took office, he said that, look, this is my job. I'm going to adjudicate. I'm going to get rid of the pending litigation and, get disposed the criminal cases which are pending before Supreme Court. And I think that, to be honest, he has done a good job. And if you say that, look, if you go by what has happened in the past and how Nawaz Sharif was able to proceed abroad, if you look at the court proceedings, the government had a fair opportunity to present its point of view before the court. But over there, they were not taking responsibility of, ensuring that Nawaz Sharif's life would be safe in Pakistan. They were not negating the fact that the treatment being given to him in Pakistan was safe and was sufficient for the purposes of addressing his heart issues and his platelet problems. Even NAB in those cases, they did not disagree with they were not taking responsibility or liability or opposing his bail applications.
So towards the end, there seemed to be a uniform opinion that he would probably get better care and that he should proceed abroad.
Even Imran Khan, he said this thing. He gave out a statement. He said that for the first time that he expressed the desire that he gets well soon.
Right.
So I mean, at every stage and in every manner, the government was provided representation, and it gave its point of view before the courts. So when the decision comes out, and then you speculate, and then because the problem in Pakistan is, we are not consistent. When it was the case of Musharraf going abroad, Imran Khan did not oppose that. So, I mean, why a different, form of opinion for him and why a different one for Nawaz Sharif? If we are consistent, then when we will stand on principles, other people will have belief in us, will have faith in us.
So, in that sense, the Supreme Court has shown consistency, you would say?
Consistency, that was a different case. I wouldn't say consistency. This was a different case. The facts were different. Musharraf, as we all knew, he flew, and then we know that what kind of understanding was there. Over here, the government is not going to. The government denies that there is any kind of an NRO or
Right.
and in that particular case, we all know that NRO was going on, and Benazir Bhutto was meeting ISI chief in Dubai, and Musharraf was having these kind of discussions. But over here, we don't have any. Maybe in the future, maybe we might see something, because
But what about
sometimes
this foreign funding
but
case? I mean, coming back, in your opinion, the fact that the PTI is opposing it in the court, whereas, of course, politically, on the one hand, they're saying they have nothing to hide. It does send a mixed signal, does it not, at the very least, at this time? Ji Asab.
Yeah, I mean, just so many issues, counter issues, it's just so difficult to, put them all together on an even keel. But yeah, I mean, there are just so many
Because we
contradictions
saw that
in
as far as the
everybody's
Panama
position.
case is concerned,
Yeah.
of course, that was a different case altogether, and in a lot of ways there cannot be comparisons. But in one instance, the former Prime Minister, his family would come out and say that categorically they had nothing to hide and that everything was already declared. They had made statements while to the Election Commission also. But then they tried till the very end, legally, I mean, through all the legal measures that they had, to prevent the court from delving into the matter, to for that kind of scrutiny that eventually is happening even, and did happen at some stage, to prevent that. So that kind of two tracts, that same thing can be seen. Do you think that there is a comparison there?
Yeah, I mean, they also tried to delay things. First of all, there was the demand for for a parliamentary commission,
Right.
to let the parliament decide about it, and they refused. I think they just took it too lightly. They were quite
Right.
sure that they will not get trapped, and they kept trying to push it away, and then
But you see-
suddenly.
Right.
But then I don't think they were as smart as PTI. PTI has been able to drag this for 5 years. Right, and they were at maximum been able to drag it for 18 months, maximum 2 years after it erupted. So I think PTI has been much better at handling it, and that's why you see it. And then there were the contradictions at that time when Musharraf was leaving, PMLN was opposing it. You still see clips of Saad Rafiq and other people opposing it. How can you let a person
let a
under
person-
trial go out, and suddenly
Right.
they
They're
are now
themselves
supporting the
right
fact.
there, exactly. That is
Exactly. So,
true.
there are so many contradictions in practically everybody's position, but that's where you expect, the judiciary and those institutions to be above it, and, develop, clear mechanisms, clear procedures, clear criteria for, so many of these things. But unfortunately, we see even, that lack of clarity from the judiciary itself. Now, I mean, it looks very unusual for, a prisoner, a convicted person, to be let out first out of jail and then allowed to go abroad. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I mean, there are two things to look at. First of all, is he seriously ill? And I think, the government board has, given, a
Right.
judgment about that. So I don't think we should even,
Be
talking about
And
it.
like Danish is saying, there is, of course, at the time that he's allowed to go, there seems to be a uniform opinion
Yeah.
from the
From the
government,
government side,
the NAB,
everybody's side.
from the investigation teams. Everybody seemed to agree that this would probably
Yeah, and then there is a
something that's
question: should
needed.
he be allowed, outside of the country? That depends on the level of the flight risk.
Right.
And then if they're talking about Isaac Dar, they're talking about his sons, but they're not talking about his own case, that he left his dying wife on the deathbed,
And
and
came
he
back,
came
right.
back immediately once the verdict was announced, without
Right.
dragging his feet. So how can you talk about a flight risk after that? And then the fact that his daughter is still here, his political fortunes are still here. So overall, and then looking at how controversial even his conviction was, personally I don't have too many issues with him being allowed back, and I'm quite sure that he'll come back once he is healthy enough to come back.
Ji Javed sir.
I think, in my opinion, if you talk about the injustices done to Mr. Nawaz Sharif, and if you talk about the verdicts passed against him, the only platform, Maruf, and the only forum which can overturn those unjust verdicts is the judiciary. I think we can't pass judgments. If we start passing judgments on one particular instance, then we can go on, and there should be no end to it. Why can't he once again revisit his cases, and then he I think he would be able to find justice as well. But when we talk about Musharraf, he was not convicted. When we talk about Mr. Nawaz Sharif, he was convicted. And I think the two cases really can't be compared, the two different situations. But again, I think even in that particular instance, he should not have been allowed to go outside the country.
But what about this case? I mean, let's move on. I mean, as far as this foreign funding case is concerned, the fact that the PTI has now moved to the High Court, how do you see? I mean, the court, of course, has to adjudicate one way or the other. And, you know, on the one hand, of course, you know, the court doesn't want to get involved in political considerations. But on the other hand, when it is approached on matters just like this, then they have to give a judgment one way or the other.
Maruf, this is what I'm talking about. If you believe in rule of law, then rule of law should not be confined to any particular instance or any particular case.
Right.
Rule of law means across the board implementation of rule of law. Whether it is concerning the former Prime Minister's exit from Pakistan, or it is the PTI's foreign funding case. I think rule of law is basically for every citizen of Pakistan, whether the person is sitting at a high place or the person sitting at the low place.
Right.
But unfortunately in Pakistan, the impression which has been created in the past couple of weeks is that there are no equals in Pakistan.
You're agreeing with the Prime Minister?
Yes, some people, I think this is what the optics, if you look at the optics, this is what you, kind of a picture you get, what is happening on the ground. Some people are privileged and some are not. Maybe there are many other people, they never even, like they say, you lock up a person and throw away the key. But in this particular instance, the key was not thrown away and he was given a special treatment. And but I think it would be quite obvious and natural to compare different cases. Even in the, why we are comparing it? We are comparing it because there are contradictions in every action being taken on the ground in so many ways. Like I think you rightly pointed out, Murtaza Sahab pointed out that the top leadership of Pakistan Muslim League Noon had a very particular stance as far as allowing President Musharraf to go outside the country.
Right,
now, the same is not applicable on them. And if people talk about a lot of people who had flown outside the country and now they are residing in London, I think they are not being unjust. Like Mr. Ishaq Dar, the sons of the former Prime Minister, is many other relatives who have gone outside the country and they are still residing over there. They never intend to come back to Pakistan and face the cases in Pakistan. I think the skeptics in Pakistan believe that rightly or wrongly, that once the Prime Minister is gone, there is a probability and likelihood that he might not return. Now coming to this, your particular question, your particular point you are raising again and again, why Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is not facing the foreign funding issue. They should do that, because if they try and run away from that, they would be, I think the people would be justified in saying that while we talk about the rule of law, when you say that the people are equal in Pakistan, there are no mighty people and there are no lesser mighty people and no insignificant people, then I think they should be presenting the example themselves. It is about time that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf should come forward and present every record they have in front of Election Commission of Pakistan and get themselves cleared. This way, I think the Prime Minister would be raising his stature and the party would be raising its stature, and people would start trusting once again in the political culture and democratic project in Pakistan. But Maruf, having said that, if Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf tries and runs away from this particular accountability process which they have been championing themselves, I think then the question marks would be quite justified, and they would be damaging their reputation as a party which was untarnished in so many ways.
Right, Barrister Sahab, what about the process now as far as the move to the High Court is concerned? In such cases, what normally does happen?
Well, normally in Islamabad High Court or the High Courts, the procedure is not as lengthy as is in the lower courts, and petitions are decided, in a much faster way. But we can't really say for any particular case, especially considering that in the previous petition that they filed in the High Court, it took more than a year for the case to be sent back to the, the Election Commission. So one doesn't know the length of time and what the Election Commission is trying to achieve, the day-to-day proceedings. It might
Is it
not
normal
actually
for cases in the Election Commission to be heard on a day-to-day basis? Is it up to them to set the pace? How does it work in the Election Commission?
Well, they do have the powers, you know. I mean,
to do it on a day-to-day
yeah,
basis?
they do have the powers to do it.
Depending
And
on you know, the severity, the legal severity of the case, the way that, you know, they have some criteria according to which they decide, of course.
yes, possibly also the conduct of a particular party, you know, whether
Right,
it has been
okay.
employing
If
some
there's been
delaying
delaying, like you
tactics.
said, there's in this
Yes.
case there's been a lot of delaying tactics,
Yes.
in your opinion.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you know, if you look at the orders that have been passed in this particular case, you know, over and over again, we've seen delaying tactics. Either the party does not appear, or the, you know, the litigant, the advocate does not appear. So what I'm trying to suggest is that they do have the powers, but they do have the. I mean, they should apply those powers judiciously, so as to not let this perception build that you know, particular party is being targeted or something. In this case, I don't think they are doing that, to be honest. And
Right.
regarding the cases of the other political parties, I do agree that all political parties, regardless of PMLN, People's Party, or any other political party, they should be more open. And as was said, you know, that whether they're receiving foreign funding or the domestic funding, if it is from unknown sources or there is some illegality involved, there should be a more openness, you know, because this particular parliament, you know, it is the third parliament of its kind, the third transition to democracy that we are experiencing. So if these, you know, prerequisites
Right.
are followed, and if political parties know that they have to be open about who is funding them, and you know, why we talk about foreign funding in particular and why they are so much more important is because, you know, then allegations of foreign influences in our you know, government, they are involved, and especially so if the cases are from hostile countries, you know, there are allegations
so,
of.
so of course the
yeah.
case itself is of a sensitive, if it's, you know, the funding is from a sensitive source, then it becomes the court I mean they have to look at it as far as the election commission is concerned or the court is concerned. But in cases like this, Niaz Sahab, your final comments before I close.
Final
I'm
comments, you know,
running out of
just at the macro view, you started by asking whether the temperature will go down.
Right.
And I mean, you know, just look at the pace with which issues are coming up. You know,
Right.
a big thing like the Dharna, it's almost forgotten now. Plan B is almost forgotten.
Right.
Even Nawaz Sharif's exit is in the rear view mirror, fast receding, and now it's, you know, the foreign funding case. And I have a feeling, you know, new and new issues will keep coming up, and you know, the political situation is going to get more and more dicey, and unfortunately, you know, governance is going to suffer because, you know, the government, I mean, it wasn't doing very well even when, you know, things were more placid, say till about 6 months ago, and now with all these things coming at the government, you know, it's going to become even more and more difficult for it to govern the country properly.
Right, Ji Javed Sahab.
I agree with Murtaza Sahab that these are the distractions which really cause a serious harm to the government's credibility. If government is involved in such controversies, I think their basic and primary task to provide basic services to the people of Pakistan would be
And
forgotten.
of course, economy is a huge issue at this
Economy,
time.
of course,
And then,
economy is
foreign of, you
in
know,
is
as far as our-
serious
right.
trouble right now. And if the focus of the government is shifted to other issues which are concerning the party itself, I
Right.
think that would be quite serious
Unfortunate
setback
at this time, right.
for Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf's
Unfortunately,
governance initiative.
Right. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining us today, Barrister Danish Iftikhar. Thank you for being with us. Dr. Niaz Murtaza, thank you for joining us. Javed Jadoon Sahab, thank you for being with us. As far as the rule, of course, the rule of law is supreme and should be supreme, and it should be across the board. Accountability, of course, should be across the board also. At this time, justice should not only be done, but be seen to be done. All of this is true also, but on the other hand, of course, whether the court likes it or not, at times it is dragged into deciding political decisions, into political considerations that perhaps it would rather not do. That also is a political reality. Of course, for democratic traditions, for political stability, it's important for the government also to try and do whatever it can to facilitate anything, you know, facilitate as far as giving up any documents, any information as far as this case is concerned. Let's see what happens. But of course, as far as political temperatures are concerned, it seems that in the course of the next few weeks, things will, you know, be anything but dying down. Thank you so much for joining us today on this.